Let's get into the particulars, for example. The $89 million. Did y'all know that part of the agreement is that the owners will match whatever the players contribute up to $250,000 annually to certain causes pertaining to the African-American community? The kind of issues that Colin Kaepernick and others were talking about addressing. We know this. If you don't know it, you know it now. Number two, the NFL, Colin Kaepernick himself, Eric Reid himself, they were never protesting against the National Football League and its owners. They were protesting against society in terms of wanting to bring attention to racial oppression, racial inequality, and other things pertaining to disenfranchised communities throughout our nation. They were not complaining against the National Football League. Number three, when you talk about Malcolm Jenkins and the Players Coalition, they're saying their priority wasn't Colin Kaepernick. Their priority were the issues. We even have Josh Norman quoted on the record beefing with Eric Reid over a conference call written by an article in our very own The Undefeated, where he was saying to Eric Reid, let's just be real about what's going on here. Where's Colin Kaepernick to speak up for himself? And oh, by the way, this is bigger than just one man. We understand that what's happening to Colin Kaepernick is wrong, but this issue is bigger than him. And if we're about uplifting and helping our communities, that takes precedent, which brings me back to Eric Reid. What is Eric Reid's real problem here? Max, you keep pointing to the numbers. You keep pointing to the deal, the intricacies of the deal itself. I'm willing to bet you my check that Eric Reid would not have a problem with the same exact deal that was reached if A, Colin Kaepernick had a job, and B, he was leading the front against the owners as opposed to Malcolm Jenkins, which means that the intricacies of the deal itself, while he may not like it, his real issue at the core of it all is his lack of trust for individuals that he doesn't believe are aligned with Colin Kaepernick's thinking. That is fair. I understand where he is coming from, but in the end, this wasn't about Colin Kaepernick, and it's not about you. And if you want to make it about how Colin Kaepernick, well, guess what? He took this knee, and he's the one that spearheaded this movement. Understand, in a roundabout way, and I'm being totally transparent here, it was really President Donald Trump. Because if Donald Trump doesn't show up at that rally on September 22nd, 2017 in Huntsville, Alabama, and say, I'd fire all those SOBs, Jerry Jones would have never kneeled. And the players wouldn't have locked arms in unison as one entity and brand. And they would have never been at the negotiating table with those owners because Colin Kaepernick's protest would have been exactly that. But Eric Reid ignores that and in the process makes a public spectacle of himself, embarrasses himself, and highlights a problem that exists within our community because every single time somebody black disagrees with somebody else who is black, it can't be a disagreement. It's got to elevate to character assassination where somebody's a sellout, where I see points on both sides.
Yep.
And I applaud, my last point is I applaud Malcolm Jenkins because Malcolm Jenkins was class personified yesterday, Damian, when he said, you couldn't pay me to address this subject. I am not going to insult my brother, especially to y'all. I wish Eric Reid was that kind of man on this particular Sunday.
Stephen A. and Damian, I appreciate the point that it feels embarrassing when you have a movement, and this doesn't just happen with black people, Stephen A., or African Americans, which may make you feel better about it. This happens in all kinds of social movements. There are divisions and between the more radical and the less radical. And the reason I bring up the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, the SCLC, and the break with the SNCC, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, back when, in the 60s, is because that represents the same sort of thing. The more radical element says your patient long game is not good enough. As Martin Luther King said, justice postponed is justice denied, right? So we need justice now. And sometimes that division becomes public. And in this case, it became public. So when I say Eric Reid has a point, I like the way Malcolm Jenkins handled it very much. What I mean is they're kind of illustrating the difference that has occurred in the civil rights movement and in most social movements between the less radical and the more radical.
All right, I thought
it's just an embarrassing situation. Like I said, on this day, Eric Reid is a smart brother. He's educated. He's a damn good football player, but he embarrassed himself on this Sunday afternoon. He's better than that, and it's a damn shame that he regressed to that point. It really is.